Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Psychedelic Vantage. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin. Just yesterday, the FDA granted breakthrough therapy designation to CYB003, Cybin's proprietary deuterated psilocybin analog in development for the adjunctive treatment of major depressive disorder. Along with this exciting news, Cybin also announced that they raised $150 million USD from some really big name healthcare investors. Doug, congratulations to you and to the whole team at Cybin for hitting these significant milestones. How are you doing today?
Hey, Jake, hey, Adam. And look, obviously, we're very excited about this. It has been, as we all know, it's been a bit of a biotech winter for the last couple of years and a hard slog. And this is sort of, though, the team getting rewarded for all the hard work. It's still incredible to me that we've gone from inception to breakthrough therapy designation with a brand new company in like 3, 4 years. It's kind of nuts.
Congratulations. Yeah, this is extremely exciting for Cybin, obviously, and also for the entire sector. So without further ado, let's just jump right into this. Cybin achieved breakthrough therapy designation for CYB3. Can you speak to the significance of this and what it means for Cybin moving forward?
Yeah, so apart from being obviously good validation of the compound, clearly FDA believes that the compound is safe and effective in MDD. It brings two things. It's really speed and certainty, right? So on the certainty side of things, rather than go ahead with our phase 3 study and then submit the data on the endpoints we've chosen and see if it's okay with FDA, we get to decide with them up front. Right? And we have a collaborative discussion. We agree on phase 3 design. We agree on the endpoints, and that de-risks the phase 3 design. So that's tremendous for shareholders. And the other thing is speed. In that we get access to rolling review, which means we can submit data as we go along. We get priority review, so that's potentially a 6-month review period instead of 12, and accelerated approval. And I was saying this to someone earlier today that many of the large antidepressant drugs that have been approved in the past have peak sales of $3 or $4 billion. Right? So if you think about us, trimming time off of the patent life or saving time on the patent life before they go generic, then 6 months could be worth $2 billion if we save 6 months. So it's not just a nice designation, and a conversation with FDA has real prospects for evaluation too.
I hear that, and you and your team have delivered every step of the way thus far, so that's extremely significant. You also announced a large oversubscribed capital raise. How does this change your cash runway moving forward?
So, like, I mean, this raise is entirely designed to fund the phase 3 program. That's the goal. We're also, though, going to be funding our deuterated DMT phase 2 program as well, which we can talk about. Look, I couldn't be more humbled by the list of investors in this round. I always say that any biotech company would be proud to have those investors in the round. And I think that also retail investors should be really happy with it as well. That these guys are very smart, they're very diligence heavy. They're not looking for a 10% return here at these levels. They're looking for Cybin to develop into a multi-billion-dollar company. That's what they want. And they're putting their money into the company to help us finish the development and get to that point. So I think that's good for retail investors as well.
Doug, can you highlight the significance of this being oversubscribed?
Yeah, it was very, very oversubscribed. And I think that just shows the shift in sentiment in the space overall. We've gone from a point of, a little bit of skepticism, maybe some heavy skepticism, to now investors being completely comfortable with the development risk and the commercial risk. Now, from a development point of view, we all know now these molecules work, and the psychiatric community knows that these molecules work. But it's only really, I think, the success of Spravato, the high growth rate of that compound, despite the really challenging dosing schedule, and the spread of Spravato centers is 3,500 or so now. That now, and also all of that's reimbursed, right? The sessions before, the sessions after, the drug, the dosing session. So now investors can point to that and say, all right, there's a framework already there. We haven't got to build it from scratch. We can just build off of it. And I think that penny has finally dropped with investors, which is why you're seeing them, all scrambling to get into these rounds.
Oh man, we are so excited on the retail side of this. Um, how,
Absolutely.
how does your CYB3 psilocybin program differentiate itself from other notable psilocybin programs in the space?
All right. Well, first of all, we're seeing incredibly robust efficacy and durability. To see 22-point reduction in MADRS score after a couple of doses, and to see that sustained through basically 4.5 months from baseline, and robust. I mean, those lines are flat. They're not regressing back to baseline. They are solid. I mean, we're confident we're going to get at least 6 months of benefit out of one cycle of treatment, which is
Wow.
pretty incredible. So the efficacy, of course, and the durability. But a couple of different things in our study, aside from the 2-dose regimen. One is we are treating MDD patients. So this is a much larger population to recruit from, and a much less challenging population to recruit with as well. We're also not asking patients to come off their background medications. Patients are scared about doing that. And it's challenging. It takes 6-8 weeks to titrate off of these things, SSRIs, and it's not linear. It's not easy to do. It can be pretty scary. And then the patient runs the risk of getting a placebo, right? So that's a big barrier to recruiting. So I think not having to titrate off and going after a larger population, we think our recruiting will be more efficient. And I think it also reflects the bulk of the depressed community, about 70% of the depressive population.
I have always loved Cybin's their plan to use CYB3 as an adjunct treatment. As you said, it can be very difficult, even when the drug, even though the antidepressant is not working, doesn't mean it's easy to come off of.
Right.
And just to take it back a little bit on the investors you got on board, a notable one for me was RA Capital. They have a great track record, and they've been very selective in this space with who they invest in. So I believe right now it's GH Research, Compass, and now Cybin. So that was a name I was looking at. So taking it back to the data here. So recently we recorded a video on Cybin's 4-week data of CYB3. Adam and I, and of course many others, were extremely impressed with the results. And now we have the 16-week data, and the durability seen with CYB3 combined with psychological support is pretty mind-blowing. Were you at all surprised to see trial participants' depression symptoms improve this much by week 16 after just 2 doses of CYB3?
I mean, honestly, yes, the magnitude. I can tell you that preclinically, we saw some properties with CYB3 that we thought were interesting, right? We saw an increase in bioavailability, and we saw an increase in brain penetration. We were getting 40% more drug in the brain than compared to regular psilocybin. So it's getting out of the peripheral circulation into the brain. But we had no idea if that would translate into any clinical benefits at all. You just don't know. But clearly it is. We're seeing much larger magnitudes of reduction in depressed symptoms, and even further reduction from the second dose. And I'll talk about why the second dose is important. But to see that persist out to about 4.5 months and not regressing, we're not seeing those lines fade away. But 75% of patients in remission, 4.5 months out, we're feeling very good about that and pleasantly surprised. The 2-dose regimen, from the outset, was always a bit of a competitive tactic in that, these treatments are not things that people want to go through on a very frequent basis. And that can be quite burdensome. I mean, these experiences are quite powerful. So the longer you can have between dosing sessions, we think, the better. So a cycle of treatment here, we're giving these 2 doses, but with the trade-off being that maybe patients won't have to come back for at least 6 months. and maybe for some patients longer than that. And it also plays into how we interact with FDA around our safety database and the number of patients we have to have in our studies. Beyond 6 months, we think FDA will consider the next depressive episode the patient has as a new, fresh, acute episode, not a relapse of the last one that you've got to retreat. So that means that your treatment then is labeled as an acute treatment. So we don't have to define a retreatment regimen beyond 6 months, is our expectation. We'll see what happens. But that, I think, is really flexible for prescribers, really flexible for patients, and reduces the overall cost and size of our phase 3 program as well.
Thank you, Doug. And I would like to ask, 16 milligrams, the highest dose used in this trial. Can you give us an understanding of how that compares maybe to what we typically see with synthetic psilocybin of 25 milligrams? Is it more of a powerful or intense experience?
Yeah, that's hard to say. We haven't done that direct head-to-head comparison.
Okay.
As I said, I do know that preclinical, we're getting more of this active in the brain, and we do see an increase in potency. So with CYB3, we see psychedelic effects that begin as early as 3 milligrams. And then by 8 milligrams, they're more intense. By 10 milligrams, we had 2/3 of subjects score 100% on the visual analog scale. So we're really getting robust, robust effects. When we look at the 16 and the 12 milligram data, there's not a lot of difference really between it with these sample sizes. The efficacy looks about the same and the side effect profile looks about the same. But because the goal here is to agonize as many 5-HT2A receptors as we possibly can, and the 16 milligram dose is safe, we're going with the higher dose. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are you guys attributing the increase in bioavailability to the specific analog that you're using, or is there something else?
It's to the deuteration. I mean, there's
Okay.
two parts of the molecule that are different from traditional psilocybin. So psilocybin is a prodrug, has to be metabolized to psilocin. That's not 100% efficient. You're not getting 25 milligrams of psilocin from 25 milligrams of psilocybin, right? So the actual active dose is lower. We've taken the active agent and deuterated it. So we've removed the metabolic step. So patients don't have to go through that metabolic process. We all metabolize things differently. Metabolism affects a lot of different drugs. So you always want to give the active drug as you can, if you can. It's more efficient and there's less challenges with metabolism. So that's the first thing. And then the deuteration is having this other impact on bioavailability and brain penetration. And there is a certain pattern of deuteration that we've developed here. We looked at a number of different deuteration patterns. This one's quite complex, but it seems to be doing its job very efficiently.
Oh, that's extremely interesting.
Yeah.
For the upcoming phase 3 trial, how did you arrive at choosing 16 milligrams instead of 12 milligrams? And how do you explain the variability of outcomes between the two doses based on the current data?
Yeah, so as I said, the 16, not really much difference overall in terms of efficacy or safety, but as it's not unsafe and it's well tolerated, we're going to go with a higher dose just so we might get as many people across the line as possible. Patients vary in terms of their receptor expression profiles, their receptor polymorphisms, so the higher dose might help some people just get across the line more efficiently. When I look at the variability between the two groups, it's really hard to say. These are fairly small sample sizes, admittedly. Really great data, gives us a lot of confidence for phase 3, but you're going to have variability, and you can see the error bars on the chart, so they're fairly overlapping. We'll see the variability decrease with a larger sample size, but we're not really seeing statistically any difference between 12 and 16 milligrams.
I got you. Thank you. Let's assume CYB3 is approved and commercialized. What sort of medical settings do you see this being offered in? Is there an existing infrastructure already in place to support the wide-scale rollout of this treatment?
Yeah, and I think there's a saying, this is what I think is finally getting investors excited, is that they see now that there is an infrastructure that already exists that CYB3 can drop into, and that is the 3,500 clinics that are providing support for and treatment with Spravato. Those are all trained. They're all trained with the REMS. They're all trained with this experience. It's not much different, really, not materially. They're all trained with dispensing. They're all getting reimbursed. All right. So there's reimbursement for the consultation session before dosing. There's reimbursement for the dosing session. There's reimbursement for the follow-up session after, which you're going to have a safety follow-up after dosing of any of these. Make sure the patient's okay. And then the drug is being reimbursed as well. So not only is there a whole network of physical centers, the whole reimbursement infrastructure is there as well. And let's not forget, I mean, although Spravato is growing really fast and it's J&J's fastest growing product, the protocol there is much more intense. It's 8 visits to a clinic in the first 4 weeks.
Yep.
Each of those visits is 2 hours. The patient's has to be driven home. They're not allowed to drive or operate machinery for the rest of the day. It means they probably aren't going back to work. And we're talking about 2 visits to the clinic every 6 months potentially. So we think that's pretty competitive.
It definitely sounds like it.
Absolutely.
Amongst the retail investors in the community, there is still a fair amount of confusion around what type of therapy component or psychological support is required to administer this type of psilocybin-based treatment. Can you speak to what this support might look like and the availability of trained professionals to handle the wide-scale rollout?
Yeah, so in terms of the trained professionals, we'll get there. As I said, I think some of the training from Spravato is going to be applicable to some of these compounds. There'll need to be some top-up training, but there's a foundation there. Our Embark program has had more than 4,000 folks sign up for that training program. It's an online, free, open access program. So there's definitely interest. But in terms of the actual psychological support, so to be clear, we're not doing any psychotherapy around these treatments. FDA has been clear as well. They want to separate psychotherapy from the drug. And psychological support may be a bit misleading. It sounds like there's more to it than there really is. It's really about before the patient goes in to their first ever psychedelic experience, they're given some education, right? There's a strong and detailed informed consent process, and we explain and educate the patient on what to expect. They're given tools by their facilitator to deal with any anxiety that might come up in the session. These can be sometimes quite powerful, right?
Yes.
And they talk about the treatment. They talk about the patient's condition. So they're going into the session with some level of intent, and through that process, they're also building trust with the facilitator. This is one thing. This is one of the reasons we think that the 2 doses is important, because in that first dosing session, patients are a little anxious. They're not, first time taking a psychedelic, they don't know what to expect fully. And even if they've been educated, they're a little skeptical, or maybe they're a bit resistant or a bit hesitant, or maybe they just don't trust the process and can't fully let themselves go. By the second dose, they know exactly what to expect. And so we see in the study, the second dose was for everyone more intense. The experience was more intense than the first one. So anyway, good preparation going in terms of educating the patient. No psychotherapy happening in the dosing session. The patient is wearing an eye mask, listening to music through a headset. They're doing all the internal work themselves. There's no intentional interaction with the observers in the room, but they're there for safety. So maybe there's a bit of hand-holding or comforting if the patient gets anxious. And then the follow-up session is a safety follow-up. Like after any of these kinds of treatments, you want to make sure the patient's okay, that there aren't any lingering effects or any untoward effects from the treatment, and talking about the experience, and the patient is kind of self-learning from the experience and unpacking it, and it kind of falls into place over the next couple of days. So I know there are lots of words that have been used for these kind of things, in the community.
Yeah.
But I think we can medicalize this, and it's already being done with Spravato.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds very similar to what they're doing, even with ketamine infusions generally. So
That's right. That's right. So with all of this exciting news about CYB3, it can be easy for some to maybe forget that CYB4, Cybin's deuterated DMT, delivered via an intramuscular injection, is set to enter phase 2A study in generalized anxiety disorder this year. Can you speak a bit about what separates CYB4 from other DMT programs in the space?
Yeah, look, I'm really excited about CYB4.
Yeah.
And I'm also excited about what we're getting out of the small pharma combination in that we had done a bunch of work using IV infusion with deuterated DMT. Small pharma had developed an intramuscular formulation.
Yes.
We've been able to accelerate CYB4 into a phase 2 study straight into an intramuscular formulation, which saved us 9,
Wow.
12 months, something like that.
Wow.
This will be like a simple shot in the arm. Anyone can give these. We've all had a bunch of shots over the last few years, right? So it's very easy to give. If your technician at CVS can do it, then
Hmm.
it's going to be straightforward. A 90-minute experience.
Wow.
So that is pretty scalable and pretty competitive compared to say I know we just saw pretty good GAD data from MindMed with
Right.
LSD, but there's a much longer experience, many hours. So we think this is really competitive. But also the PK profile is interesting. The way we formulated it, and because of the intramuscular route, patients get up into that breakthrough experience pretty quickly, within a few minutes. And then they once it peaks, they start to come back down. And as you guys may well know, that going up part is they're a bit anxious,
Hmm.
but on the way down, that's when all the psychological work happens and they're relaxed. They're kind of like, oh, I didn't die. I'm okay. Oh, good.
Yeah.
And, and
Yeah.
then and then relaxing and all that work gets done. And the bulk of the 90 minutes is in that tail of the experience. So some of the benefits of dragging it out and extending it, and making it different to regular DMT.
Thank you, Doug. And I would like to ask, so with at least the clinical trials right now, there's usually two therapists. Could you see the day where someone like a psychiatrist has a private practice, they get maybe some training on psychological support for these psychedelic compounds? Could you see a day where someone can go to their psychiatrist and their psychiatrist delivers the drug and the work is done in a private practice? Is that in the realm of possibilities?
Yeah, of course. Look, I mean, everyone running studies of psychedelics right now has to have two observers in the room.
Yes.
It's FDA mandated. It comes from, as you know, some of the incidents that happened in some of the MDMA studies.
Yes.
We all know that MDMA is a very different animal. We all know that how it makes them feel quite emotionally attached, right?
Yep.
And so that probably led to some interactions that shouldn't have happened. But also, there's that interaction with the therapist in the room. There's talking and empathy. There's a connection there that's going on. It's a very different situation. But FDA wants to be cautious. And to quote Tiffany, they want to be able to take someone's license away if something goes wrong. But this is just in clinical studies. Very soon you'll have two phase 3 studies from COMP360, two from CYB3. You'll have other studies, with LSD and other compounds, and we'll have enough safety data, I hope, to show FDA that we don't need to have two people in the room. You
Okay.
know, I would be hopeful that you could have someone of a lesser qualification than a psychiatrist because they're not going to sit in the room. I'd be hopeful you could have some kind of central monitoring, either one person looking at cameras in multiple rooms being
Yes.
dosed at the same time, or
Yes.
video or something like that, or recording. There's lots of things we can do to be creative and to reduce the costs and burdens. But FDA is just being cautious right now, but I don't think that will be the commercial model.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Doug. And my final question is, it's a huge year for both your company and for the whole psychedelic medicine space. I can't stress that enough. What are you most looking forward to seeing this year?
Yeah, it really is a breakout year already, isn't it? After
Yes.
after the sort of uh, the dearth of biotech last year, it's great to see this year starting off really well, not just for biotech, but for the sector. The big things coming this year. The Lycos NDA approval would be a big win, I think, for the sector. It also starts to then prime more centers for treatment of other psychedelics. COM360 phase 3 data at end of the year. We all hope it's positive. It's good for the sector overall. Look, we're pretty close to starting a phase 2 study in GAD with CYB4. That'll read out at the end of the year. I mean, I am really excited about that. We get to do this all over again in a few months' time with CYB4, and I think that really could be the gold standard. Imagine a quick 90-minute experience, and you go home. Anyway, so that those are the things I think that are going to happen this year, and likely a bunch of other companies too that are doing work will have data readouts as well.
Absolutely. There's going to be no shortage of news this year, that's for sure. Very exciting.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this interview. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed filming it. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. It really, really helps out. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.